Hi everyone. So at the start of May I switched my tariff to Intelligent Octopus Flux, partly because I thought it would be a neat thing to try out, but also because my rule of thumb estimate suggested that it was the best tariff for me to be on. If you've not seen my rule of thumb video, please check that out. I'll put a link up in the corner. And yeah, I thought, well, I'll give it a go and see what it's like. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with Intelligent Octopus Flux, it's a smart tariff from Octopus similar to their standard Flux tariff. So it's intended for solar and battery installs. And the main difference between the regular Flux and Intelligent Flux is Intelligent Flux, Octopus actually control your battery for you rather than letting you control it. So it's designed to work currently only with GivEnergy battery systems, which thankfully we've got, so we were able to sign up. The sign up process is pretty straightforward. You just use the app to say, I have a GivEnergy battery system, and then you link it to your GivEnergy account, and they then hook up and start controlling your battery for you. So this is the website for the Intelligent Flux tariff, and it's got most of the information you could need here, so you can take your own look there. And the main important feature is this import and export tariff here. It's the same, so it doesn't matter whether you're importing or exporting, you get the same amount for exporting as you pay for import, which is the main difference between this and the regular Flux. So in regular Flux, your import tariff is somewhat higher than your export tariff. So you would typically charge overnight with Intelligent Flux because they have an off-peak period. With regular Flux, you have an off-peak period between 2 and 5 in the morning, and then you have a standard tariff during the day, and then a peak period between 4 and 7 in the evening. So what I would do on regular Flux is charge my battery up overnight at the cheap rate, or maybe using excess solar, because it turns out it doesn't really make much difference whether you charge overnight or using excess solar, because the import rate during the day is very similar to the export rate. The import rate during the off-peak is very similar to the export rate during the day. So actually it makes very little difference whether you charge your battery off-peak or using excess solar the following day. But then the idea is that you can then force export your battery during the peak period from 4 till 7, and you get a very good export rate. So the difference with Intelligent Flux is there is no off-peak period. It's just flat all the way through the day, but you still get this peak period from 4 until 7 in the evening. But because the import and the export tariffs are the same, because the rates are the same, it doesn't matter what you do. You can be importing or exporting, and it makes no difference, except for the fact that when you get to the peak period, you've got an exceptionally high export rate. So obviously you don't want to be importing during that period, but if you export during that period, then you get a really good rate. So just as an example, these are the tariffs for my area, and you can see the off-peak rate during the day is 21.5 pence. As is the for both import and export. But for the peak, it's 28.6 pence, both import and export. Now, 28.6 pence is the best export rate you will get on any tariff anywhere. So this is the main reason why it's good for people with large solar arrays and with big batteries during the summer months, because if you've got a lot to export, if you're not using all of your solar generation, then this is a great tariff to get on, because you can charge up your battery during the day and then force export it during that peak period, and you'll gain quite a large amount of money from the very high tariff rate there. So, of course, you don't control the exporting. Octopus is supposed to do that for you. And what they do is they will charge up your battery during the day, and then they will force export it during that off-peak period, during that peak period from 4 until 7 in the evening. So the idea being that they try and get the most out of your battery and help you get the best rates for your exported power. So they also have an FAQ page, of course, and that covers most of the main questions, such as what's the difference between Intelligent Flux and regular Flux? How does Octopus actually control the charging and discharging of your battery? Is it the same as Intelligent Go? No, is the short answer to that one. Will I have to make changes to my behavior? Well, the idea of this is that you shouldn't have to worry about your behavior, because Octopus are controlling your battery for you, so you can just get on with your life, and that's one of the main plus points for it. I call this the tariff I would get my granny to use, because it basically means it's a fire and forget tariff. You don't have to worry about your battery. Octopus deals with it, and you just get on with living your life. What can I expect from the app? What are the battery limits? So it will use the top 80% of your battery, and it will stop discharging your battery at 20%. Will it affect the battery life? Well, these batteries are designed for for cycling, so it shouldn't really change it that much. I'm sure I'll get people in the comments saying, of course it will. Yes, it will a little bit, but these batteries have a very long warranty, and they have unlimited cycles for the warranty, so this won't affect your warranty in any way. I don't believe that it will adversely affect the lifetime of your battery. The battery is there to be used, so you may as well just use it. And then there's some other stuff about how the billing works and all that regular stuff. Is there an exit fee? No, you can switch away at any time. So this is important. If you don't like the way Octopus are running your battery, you can switch away. I think you can only do that within 30 days. So I think you're locked in for 30 days, but after that you can switch. Otherwise, there's all this here. You can read that at your leisure. So what I'd like to do now is show you what's actually happened to my battery system over the last couple of weeks while it's been operated by Octopus. Have they been operating it in a sensible way? Well, generally speaking, I've been pretty pleased with the way things have gone. However, there have been some very interesting and odd behaviours that I'd like to share with you now. I switched to Intelligent Flux on the 1st of May. So the 2nd of May was the first full day where Octopus were in control of my battery system. So you can see it started off at a battery percentage of 20% right at the beginning of the night, because that's where they had left it after the end of the previous evening's discharge. You can see here I'm charging up for our hot water overnight. This is just us heating the hot water for a few hours, which is what I would do normally anyway. But normally what would happen is the battery would start to support the house from about 5 o'clock onwards. But you can see here it's not actually supporting the house. Everything that we're using is coming from the grid. You can see this little spike here is breakfast time where we put the kettle on. All of that is coming from the grid. Now, this is one of the interesting things about Intelligent Flux. All of your demand will come from the grid pretty much until the sun kicks in and starts providing some power from your solar panels. This is unusual and different to the way you would normally expect a battery system to run, but that's okay because the import rate and the export rate are the same. It doesn't matter whether your battery is supporting the house or if it's coming from solar or if the battery's charging or any of that stuff. It doesn't matter. None of that matters because the import rate and the export rate is the same. So that's the beauty of this tariff, actually. All you really need to do is get on with your life and let the battery do its own thing. So at 10 o'clock, Octopus decided to start charging the battery. And it just so happened there wasn't really much sun on the 2nd of May. So all of this was pretty much coming from the grid. You can see there's a tiny bit of excess solar that helped to charge the battery up at this point. But for the rest of the day, basically, it just charged from the grid up to about, about 94%. It then paused for a couple of minutes and then boosted a little bit and went up to 97% by about 4 o'clock, at which point it then switched to force export mode. And then it started exporting at about, 2.6 kilowatts. And then it ramped up a little bit at about 4:30 to 3.6 kilowatts, or rather, 4 kilowatts in this case. And then it discharged all the way through until about 6:45. Now, here is where things start getting strange. All of this stuff is more or less what I would expect it to be doing, charging up during the day and then force discharging from 4 o'clock onwards. But I would expect it to continue force discharging until 7 p.m. because that's the end of the peak period. However, it stopped at 6:45, and then we were importing from the grid because we didn't have any excess solar at this point. We were importing from the grid for the next 15 minutes. Now, admittedly, it's only a couple of hundred watts, so not really a big deal. But I found that a bit strange because the battery was still at 27%, as you can see from the info box there. So my assumption was that it would use the battery all the way down to 20%, as long as it was within that 4 till 7 p.m. period. But it didn't. It stopped at 27% at 6:45, and then just let us draw from the grid for the remaining 15 minutes. And obviously after the 7 p.m. Peak period ends, we're back to the standard rate. So, we're back to drawing from the grid. That's fine, no big deal. But then the really weird thing is that at 9 o'clock, it suddenly decided to discharge for another half an hour and exported back to the grid until the battery hit 22%. So that was a bit odd. I wasn't expecting that at all. Now I thought, well, maybe it's just the first day. It's just sort of calibrating itself and doing that. But however, it did more or less the same thing the following day. So very similar pattern. It charged up from about 10 o'clock until, what's that, about 3:30, 3 o'clock, something like that. Boosted, and that got up to 95% this time. It then boosted for a few more minutes up to 90, well, actually 100%, and then started force discharging again at 4 o'clock. And it did that once again until it hit about 25% this time at 6:45, whereby we actually had enough excess solar to support the house at this point, so we weren't drawing from the grid. That was fine. And then it force discharged again from about 7:10 for another 20 minutes or so until the battery hit 20%, 21%. So it did the same sort of thing again, and I believe it did it for a few more days actually. Although actually, by the time we get to the 4th, things had changed slightly with with the weather. We were now getting a lot more solar, so actually we were more or less charging entirely from solar for during the day. Once again, it kicked in at 10 o'clock, charging the battery at about 2.2, 2.3 kilowatts all the way through until about 3:30. Now at this point it got to 98%, and because we still had a bit of excess solar kicking around, we were able to combine that with the battery discharge, and that actually gave us a little bit extra export, which was nice. Again, kicked in at 4 o'clock. Now this time it actually ran all the way through to 7 o'clock, because I think there was enough excess solar exporting at the same time, which meant that the battery didn't have to discharge quite as much. So by 7 o'clock it was still at 32%. So it hadn't hit that 27% limit that it seemed to be stopping at in the previous couple of days. So that's why I think it went all the way through to 7 p.m. this time. Except it carried on discharging. At 7 o'clock it continued to discharge and dropped down to 22% at 7:30. So it just decided that it would go all the way down to 22%, even though we were outside of that peak period. So this seems to be the pattern, and I believe this pattern happened again and again. Once more, on the 5th, we had not quite as much excess solar, so it stopped discharging at 6:45. We had enough excess solar actually to support the house once again, so that was fine. And then it discharged the rest all the way down to 21% this time, after that 7 p.m. period had ended. Now I'll just scroll through a few more days. I think you can see the pattern is very similar. But the interesting thing that I've noticed is that on days where we have plenty of excess solar, it does go all the way through to 7 p.m. and beyond, in fact, because there's plenty of battery capacity, it's discharging all the way, the excess solar is helping out as well. So there you go, that seems to be the pattern. If you've got enough excess solar and plenty of battery capacity, it will discharge for the full 3 hours from 4 until 7. What I don't understand is why it continues to discharge after the 7 p.m. period. I wonder actually if it's because it's trying to support the grid a little bit. So if you've got a little bit of excess capacity, maybe, and if the grid is particularly dirty at that time, maybe it's force exporting a little bit extra just to, give the grid a little bit of a boost. Now, there was this one particular day, and this is why I think this might be the case. You can see on this day, it did the standard 4 until 7, pretty much perfectly. Actually, it stopped 5 minutes early, but okay. Then it actually waited until 9 o'clock before it did this little extra force discharge from 26% down to 21%. Now, I actually had a look at the app to see what the grid carbon intensity was at that period, and it was actually pretty high. So I wonder if that's why they decided to force discharge at that time, is because perhaps they decided that that was a good time to try and support the grid and help reduce the carbon intensity. Maybe, I don't know. It's not entirely clear to me. But yeah, so I would say that generally speaking, this behavior is pretty much as I would expect. Charging up during the day. It actually says it will use excess solar to charge your battery. That doesn't appear to be the case. It will just turn on at 10 o'clock, charge all the way up to about 3:30, something like that, at this sort of 2.2, 2.3 kilowatts. And if there happens to be excess solar, that will obviously go into the battery, but otherwise it will use the grid. So I think the app is a little bit misleading when it says it will charge overnight or during the day if there's excess solar. It seems to be doing this the whole time. Maybe that's just because it's May. There typically is a reasonable amount of solar around. So that's just the way it's doing it now. I don't know how this would behave in the winter. I certainly wouldn't use Intelligent Flux during the winter, I've got to say, because I don't believe that there would be enough battery or excess solar for me to get the most out of Intelligent Flux during the winter. And I'll refer you back to my rule of thumb tariff video if you want to see why I believe that's the case. But the one thing I would suggest, if anyone from Octopus is watching, this particular day was interesting because we did actually draw from the grid for a little bit of time, and a decent chunk actually, a kilowatt or more, because the oven was on, and that the battery had stopped discharging at about 25 to 7, and the oven kicked in and started pulling from the grid at the peak rate. So that's the one piece of behaviour that I think is less desirable. It seems that Octopus just turn your battery off completely, and they don't let it continue to support your house load during that peak period. If I was to make one suggestion to Octopus, it would be to re-engage the eco mode. If you stop discharging the battery, if it's before the 7 p.m., the end of the 7 p.m. Peak period, re-engage eco mode. That's what I would suggest, so that your battery, because you've got a bit more capacity left in it, it can support your house for the remainder of that peak period. And then you can switch it back to, just drawing from the grid. That's fine. I don't really mind. As long as it's during the day rate, that's fine. I don't believe that that's a problem. It's just this little bit of extra draw from the grid during that peak period, which a lot of people, several people in my comments have mentioned that this is happening to them as well. And I wanted to obviously see if that was the case for me, and it definitely does seem to be the case for me. What I think you will probably find is if you've got a very large battery system, so you've got plenty of capacity, you may not see this behavior. So if you've got, say, two 9.5 kilowatt hour batteries, so rather than one, or what we've got is a 9.5 kilowatt hour and a 5.2. So we've got just about enough battery capacity to last us until, well, about 6:45, something like that. But if you've got two 9.5 kilowatt hour batteries, you might have enough battery capacity to last you all the way through till 7 p.m. and still have above 27%, which seems to be the point where they pause your battery. Now, so you probably won't see this behavior if you have a large amount of battery capacity. And I definitely don't see this behavior when there's a lot of excess solar, because obviously that's helping to support your export during the peak period as well. So the battery discharges less quickly and stays above that 27% limit. So as long as you've got plenty of sun, or you've got a very large battery, maybe this doesn't happen. But for anyone with a smaller battery, I think you might find that you start to draw from the grid in that last part of that peak period, which I think is obviously less desirable. And I can understand why some people would be upset about that. So if Octopus, if you're watching, that would be my suggestion. Switch on eco mode as soon as you turn off the battery export, as long as it's before the 7 p.m. period. After 7 p.m, fill your boots. I don't really care what you do. So in summary then, would I recommend Intelligent Flux? Absolutely. If you've got a large solar array and a big battery system, then definitely this is the right tariff for you in the summer months. I would probably switch away to something like Intelligent Go from October through till maybe March or April. But for the summer months, this is a very good tariff. It's a fire and forget tariff. Just let it get on with it. If you've got a smaller battery or a smaller solar array, then maybe consider regular flux instead. You'll have a bit more control over it, and you might find that you get more out of your battery system doing it yourself. So the good things about Intelligent Flux? Well, it's a very convenient tariff. It's super easy to live with. The battery just gets on with things, so you don't need to worry about any of that stuff. And of course, it's got that exceptionally high export rate. So if you've got a lot of excess solar and a big battery, then you really can't do any better than Intelligent Flux. The bad things? Well, I don't think it should ever really import from the grid during that peak period. So if it stops discharging your battery before 7 p.m, then and you start drawing from the grid, well, I think that should be a slight tweak to the algorithm, and it should switch to eco mode for the remainder of the peak period. That would be a big improvement. So please take note, Octopus, if you're watching this. And the weird, well, the strange periods of extra discharge after the peak period ends are a bit odd. I'm not really sure why it stops at sort of 27% during the peak period and then discharges for another 20 minutes, half an hour, to get that back down to 20% during the standard rate. There's really no point for it doing that, because it would only have to charge the battery up again at that same rate the following day. So I can only imagine that's because it's supporting the grid. But Well, okay, maybe they should say that in the documentation, because there's no mention of that at all. It just says, it operates the battery in a way that optimizes your battery usage for your own benefit and for the grid's benefit, but it doesn't really go into any specifics. So maybe that's what it means by that. If you're from Octopus and you're watching this video, please let me know what the intent is behind that. But yeah, overall, very pleased with it. I'm going to stick with it for the rest of the summer. I'll continue to make observations. If the behaviour changes at all, I will be the first to let you know. You can guarantee that. If you are interested in switching to Octopus and you haven't done so already, please use my referral code. If you do that, we'll both get £50 credited to our account. So that's a really big help to supporting the channel. So thank you very much if you do that. But that's it for me today. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.